I didn't give up to the corrupt Republic. I didn't give up to the Empire. And I won't give up to you.
I like
You're a
that they did the
separatist.
Law and Order
Separatist
SVU
is
thing.
a
Where
pejorative
they had a big actor play a small role early in the episode.
Support democracy.
Oh,
It's like it's him. Obviously, it's Whoopi Goldberg as the desk clerk of the
It
hotel.
was primed by the Jedi forces.
Oh no! Wait, he was just about to say Anakin Skywalker. We almost got a name drop there.
He was.
The
He
Jedi
was.
Enforcer.
Politics.
Oh, we were so close.
That was awesome.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. The Mandalorian Chapter 22 was a lesson for many on what it feels like to watch Clone Wars. Sometimes your heroes are just gonna end up in some whack-ass side quest with drunk droids, Jack Black and Lizzo, Doc Brown screaming about Count Dooku, and star-crossed seafood. Dang, Eric!
let's discuss the bantha in the room.
This is the Break Room Presents Wookiee Leaks, our weekly Mandalorian after show. I'm Erik Voss. My Easter egg breakdown is coming tomorrow, but right now I'm here discussing this interesting episode with Tommy Bechtold and Hector Navarro. Hello, friends.
Oh, Eric, it's bad bitch o'clock. It's thick 30. I've been gone so long, but I'm still flirty.
This episode had the juice and it had the delectable Mr. JB. So I just enjoyed every single morsel of this insanity.
Hector, I have to ask, you're wearing this great directed by Bryce
yes,
Dallas
I
Howard
am.
shirt. Is this what you expected the Bryce Dallas Howard episode of the season would be?
Absolutely. Do you know why? Because Bryce Dallas Howard voiced Yaddle, and Yaddle was killed by Dooku, so Bryce Dallas Howard knows everything about Count Dooku and was champing at the bit to bring back Dooku into The Mandalorian. So yes, of course this isn't what I expected. I expected Thrawn to show up, but I'm happy that Star Wars continues to try and be weird, because that's the best thing that Star Wars can do. Don't take itself too seriously, but we'll get to Thrawn. We'll get there. We'll get to Thrawn. For now, let's just enjoy Lizzo and Jack Black.
Yeah, Tommy, take us through what happened this episode.
Thrawn makes me yawn. Lizzo is got the Rizzo. All right.
So what the I thought you were going to say something else.
So what the fed happened in this episode, boys? Let's talk about it. The episode opens with a Quarren freight ship that's been hunted down by ex-wolves and the rest of the Mando mercenaries that split from Bo-Katan prior to this season's events. So from there, we see Din Djarin, Grogu, and Bo-Katan have immediately left Navarro. They're like, we're out. We're gone. And they track down Bo's old friends in the independent Outer Rim world of Plazier 15.
Yeah, they all kept saying, like, I've never heard of this planet. What is this planet? I've never heard of it.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a reminder that the Star Wars universe is pretty expansive. It didn't seem like a real shithole. It was like a pretty evolved planet that seemed, they got some interesting croquet.
Just say it, Eric. It's Epcot. This is Epcot in Orlando.
Straight
That's
up
what it
Epcot.
looked like. Straight up Epcot, complete with the monorails. We were watching Walt Disney's utopian idea of a perfect society from the 1970s. That's what
there was
this
someone
planet
getting a
is.
margarita on one block over. They're eating a nice sushi lunch.
That's right. They're definitely staying on property, which means they paid for it. So they land. They're greeted by these droids that kind of look like C-3PO and R2-D2, but then we see that they're just old, refurbished, reprogrammed Imperial droids. They're not the droids we're looking for, guys. Well, I mean, unless that's your sort of thing. Evil robots.
This doesn't bode well. Yeah, an RA-7 who greets you.
Yeah.
And anytime you see a black astromech droid, I just have a ton of questions for him. Like, what do you really think of R2-D2? Is he a little stinker? And
that guy's a little
make
bitch.
a case for yourself that Chopper is actually the most evil droid, because he is. Chopper's a piece of shit.
Well, we're all dreading the day Chopper appears again in live action to torment Eric and haunt his dreams. But first, the stuff that the dreams are made of, we get to meet Jack Black and Lizzo as the amazingly Star Wars named Captain Bombardier and the Duchess.
Bombardier, I believe, is how Jack Black insisted on.
I'm saying Bombardier because that's what it is. But you're right. Yes.
Listen, Han, it's a Star Wars tradition. We're going to have different pronunciations of the names.
Han's best friend calls him Han, so I don't know what to do. Yes, you're right. This is Bombardier. Jack Black doing some accent work from a place that doesn't exist, but I love. Well, it does exist. It's Plazier 15 or whatever. All right. So this is the crux of this episode, boys. Old Imperial droids are acting up. We're seeing droid violence on the streets.
It's basically iRobot, right? Isn't this the plot of iRobot? Down to like aggravating one droid until he fights back against you?
I'm surprised we didn't have an Alan Tudyk cameo playing a version of K2SO being like, I did not murder him. Yes, you're right.
I did not hit her. I did not. So it's up to Benson and Stabler, Din and Bo, to figure out what's going on. And by the way, if this episode wasn't heavily influenced by Law and Order, I don't know what to tell you. They literally go to a shipping dock to talk to someone.
Yeah. Some droids are just like, I've only met the guy a few times. But...
Sure, I know him, but he always kept to himself. They question Christopher Lloyd, whose name is literally Captain Hellgate. And by the way, Luke Skywalker is the protagonist of this entire thing.
Yes.
So I'm not proposing that these names are not always silly. This episode was just chock full of them, and I love it. I eat it up. Yum, yum, yum. Captain Hellgate, he handles surveillance across the city. He shows them some footage of a handful of droid attacks and kind of pushes them along on a theory for the situation, which is always suspicious when the person you're talking to is like, well, here's what I think it is.
Well, do you think his plan in that moment was to, he knew that they would aggravate one of those battle droids and that they would, kill them? Is that what he was hoping?
Or convince them that this isn't worth their time, right? He needs them. Yeah. He needs those two out of the picture because everything else is working fine. So then they go visit the Ugnaughts, who are responsible for smithing and working on the droids. They claim there aren't any malfunctioning droids, but after Din just, basically threatens everyone, and Din's move this time, he was a real hothead cop. There was a lot of good cop, bad cop in this episode.
But in this room, he was, he was super polite. Yeah. He was he recalled his relationship with Kuil, and this was my favorite part of the episode, to be honest. I just liked his connection.
I like that he said there's a way to speak to them because Bo is so clearly why did you say I have spoken? She's so clearly thrown by that, and he's like, there's a way to speak to them that only I know.
Yeah. It was a wonderful Anchorman moment where he was like, I know Katao Zhao. Katao Zhao is my cousin. You can come and we'll help you. You may go in peace. He pulled a Baxter from Anchorman is what he did.
Yeah. Yes. So they provide them... they give them some information, which leaves the duo to a loading dock, as I said. Din then provokes the droid because he hates them. Bo's like, I'm going to ask a question. Din's like, I don't like that answer. I'm immediately choosing violence. But they get that spark pad, which takes them to the droid bar, the Resistor. Not a heavy-handed name at all. And that gets them a little closer to solving the mystery. They get to the Resistor, right? Bo tells Din to let me handle this. And Din's like, sure, no problem. Take all the time you need. Psych, you get 10 seconds to come up with some conclusions. Or I'm cutting people in half. Or droids in half, anyway. So then they discover that the malfunctioning droids were all served the same batch of Nepenthe. Nepenthe? Am I saying that right?
Nepenthe. Yes, you are.
I wanted Nepenthe after this, but not the batch they got because it was contaminated with something. Then they go to the robot morgue.
I love this too. Very Law and Order. You guys are right. That's so funny.
I would say, and this actor who they pulled to play the mortician had a small role in Righteous Gemstones as the person working at the pharmacy or the whatever at the store. Where she brings back the lunch for Tim's character.
Tim Baltz's character. Right?
What is a robot autopsy? Is that a robotopsy? Is that what we're dealing with right here? That's what we just witnessed.
I think
robotopsy.
You nailed it.
Great.
You nailed it.
I think you've coined the phrase. So our two detective heroes continue their investigation. Before they can get any more information out, the droid goes nuts and starts attacking them. And that's when we find out about the nano droids, which feature a chain code that points them back towards Hellgate. Yes, if a person is named Hellgate, they are going to end up being evil, guys. I'm sorry. I don't know a lot of benevolent Hellgates in my life. That's not true. I knew a Paul Hellgate once.
Yeah.
Wait a second. He murdered 2 guys.
Yeah, you might want to Google him.
Don't Google him. So it's revealed that Hellgate is the one that commissioned the droid attacks in order to disrupt and attack the way of life on Plazir. Remember, they were like, why don't you just decommission all the droids? And then they're like, because people don't want to work. They're like the droids are. It's like Wall-E. It's like
it really is like Wall-E. Yeah, like the people are just floating around in chairs sipping Slurpees. They don't want to work anymore. They cannot carry all their hat boxes. They couldn't possibly carry all their hat boxes.
They can't. I mean, there's two. They don't want to work. They just want to bang on the croquet mallets all day.
I do like that kind of like, it's like a convenience store. It's like, we had to shutter for the weekend because kids don't want to work anymore. That's right. You want a job where you work.
They put the piece of paper up. We're so sorry, but we're not going to be able to be open for lunch anymore because people want to be paid a living wage. Anyway, speaking of radical political opinions, Hellgate reveals that he is a separatist and an ardent supporter of the late, great Count Dooku. At some point, Grogu is knighted, Christopher Lloyd is exiled to a moon, and then we get to what is probably the most important part of the episode. Bo and Din find the Night Owls, and Bo and Axe Wolves fight. I love this, guys. I thought it was really cool. They really showcased the Mandalorian weaponry that they have. When they're fighting. Bo wins. Din gives Bo the Darksaber and explains that when he was out of commission, Bo wielded the Darksaber and saved his life. Everybody's like, yeah, sure, we'll change the rules. No problem. That sounds great. That works for me. What the hell was this episode, guys?
Yeah. I mean, I have so many questions from that alone. Like, we should talk about that maybe a little bit later. I also have questions about those droids, like the nano droids. Could the nano droids also get drunk and be programmed and are separately sentient?
They have their own bar inside the droid.
They have their own tiny little bar. There's their own separatist plot in there. Before we get into talking about what this episode was, just a quick reminder to support the New Rockstars Network by grabbing some merch over at nerdriot.shop. We have some really cool Mandalorian inspired designs. I'm wearing, I think this is the first time I've worn this Mando hoodie. That's a Mythosaur hoodie. It's really cozy.
I want a Mythosaur hoodie.
Eric, thank you so much for heralding the new age of Mandalore by wearing that. That's gorgeous.
That's right. There was a night owl and I shaved it off.
Eric is the one to lead us. Eric must ride the Mythosaur.
Yes, I have a long, complicated explanation of a story that I have no evidence of, that at some point someone else fumbled the Darksaber, and that person's just going to explain to you in a rational conversation why it's rightfully mine, and it's all going to be based off of a conflict that we have that happened off screen that we're just going to tell people about. Anyway, we have thoughts, obviously. Yes. And look, you know what? This is Clone Wars. Yep. This is how Clone Wars feels. And this is a divisive episode, but some people seem to be okay with it because that's what Clone Wars was. It was kind of a story of the week thing. But I think I'm gonna save some of my thoughts for later in this episode because I think I need to calm down.
You're heating up a little bit there, Eric. Yeah, why don't you go ahead and simmer down now? Okay, we got some stuff to get into here.
We have some stuff to get into. This question of separatism. Were the separatists right? Have all other political systems been demonstrated to fail in Star Wars? We're seeing some Dooku redemption here, and why are they so interested in the character of Count Dooku suddenly in Star Wars? And I'm just gonna give my quick 2 cents on this. I think one big interesting undercurrent of this season, obviously we know that the Empire is evil. It's efficient in some ways, but Andor showed how it's not efficient in others, and it's dismissive. It's destined to fall apart. This season, The Mandalorian is showing us how the New Republic is destined to fall apart as well, just by being overwhelmed, by being poorly structured, by being overly forgiving, by being poorly communicative, by having their priorities out of whack, by not having a properly watchful eye on the resurging threat of Imperial loyalists. Now I think we're getting back to this idea of equating separatism with democracy, which is something that the Clone Wars show did really well. Saw Gerrera was a separatist, right?
Right.
The whole episode with Saw Gerrera and his sister, I think, was one of my favorite episodes of Clone Wars, and this idea of democracy, that the difference between a republic and a democracy is something that is an interesting political debate currently in America right now. But the idea of using the Senate, the Galactic Senate, is not a direct democracy; it's a republic, right? So you're having people represent you and then voting on your behalf. Specifically, Plaisir 15 they use the term direct democracy, which means like everything is decided through public state ballots, basically. Like every little thing, people just vote on every question. And then so the political leaders are really just like prime ministers, but even then, like everything is just decided through a direct democracy. And yeah, there's like political theorists who can argue that that is not the ideal form of government because like you need, like, it's like living in California. If you look at our ballots, like you guys both know this, you live in California, we vote on everything. We vote on, should there be dog catchers on Tuesdays through Thursdays?
Right,
you better believe there should.
And I would say no. No dog. Defund the dog catchers. Let the dogs roam free, I say. I love dogs.
I say net those Shih Tzus and throw them in the back of a paddy wagon.
How dare you? Hard no on the dog catcher ballot. But yeah, I think that's like, now they're making an argument that like a direct democracy might have something to go for. I don't know if it's fair to call Commissioner Hellgate evil per se. I wanted to give him more time to talk. I wanted to hear him out and say, why is Count Dooku right? Like, like what are the merits of direct democracy?
He did seem actually very like remorseful that he let the Duchess down. Like he did have like a loyalty to this character who was, we learned, like you're saying, Eric, an elected leader, but still royalty, but an elected leader. And I think going back to what you're asking is, why is Star Wars now interested in this character Count Dooku? And I think the answer is a couple of things. First of all, Christopher Lee is awesome. And I think everyone can agree that we didn't get enough Christopher Lee in the Star Wars prequel movies, right? And for George Lucas to give us the idea that a character was formerly Jedi and then goes over to the dark side before Anakin Skywalker does, you know, that's such a compelling idea. And I think that Dave Filoni and team that were working on the Clone Wars were absolutely right to want to dive into that and to actually explore that. And recently, we were talking about this before we started rolling, Dave Filoni further explored that in Tales of the Jedi, an animated show that I think is way more significant and important than I think a lot of Star Wars fans kind of took notice of. But that has a few episodes that actually shows how Dooku, being a Jedi who believes in justice and equality and fairness, could look at what the Republic was then and decide, oh, they're corrupt. This isn't going to work, and how he slowly turns to the dark side. And I think that it's absolutely interesting to look at every era of Star Wars, even as far back as what is supposed to be the utopian time of the High Republic. And I'm reading some of those books and comic books and stuff right now. And even in those stories, they talk about the failings of certain aspects of their galactic government. Because all of that stuff needs to be in the background. If this is a world, if this is a galaxy where evil can rise up and be an authoritative force and an oppressive force. And to go back to the Mandalorian for a second, I know that fans have been upset that the sequel trilogy introduced the idea that the First Order could rise after the Empire was defeated, after the heroes of the rebellion actually defeated the big bad, because we wanted a happy ending for everybody. But I think that The Mandalorian is very smartly showing the New Republic in this light of, if it's an ineffective government, and I know, Eric, I think you've talked about this before too, those are the conditions for where a new fascistic government is going to be able to gain power and gain favor from people, and to be able to convince people to go and join up as stormtroopers, or go and, give them money, or go and support, or whatever the case may be. But you have to have these political undertones in Star Wars. It was always there from the beginning. And I think that what The Mandalorian's doing, pointing to the sequel trilogy, saying that the First Order rises because the New Republic is ineffective, is actually further strengthening the power of the original trilogy's empire. The empire was so destructive that it destroyed a hundreds of years old, peaceful galaxy republic and a government, and was only around for about 30 years, right? We saw the beginning of the empire to the end of the empire, 20 some years, and it had such a devastating effect that even after they're defeated, the New Republic's trying to pick up the pieces, and Tim Meadows is look, we don't have the resources, we don't, and that leads to, of course, the First Order is going to rise up again. So there was a World War II after World War I, and a lot of the same players were involved. That's how this stuff goes. So I think it's very, very interesting to have Star Wars actually refocus and look at what the Separatists, political ideology actually was. Now, did they use droids for nefarious purposes and maybe team up with the wrong people? Palpatine behind the scenes? Yes, that's the whole point. He was trying to stoke that fire so that he could go, oh, the Separatists are so bad, we have to put me in charge. George was a genius, is what I'm saying.
I agree. I also explored on a little show called The Bad Batch this season, guys. Episodes 1 and 2 take place on Dooku's home planet. They deal with some of the surviving Separatists on that planet that he ultimately turned on as well. In the end, greed conquers all, and Dooku just started resource hoarding and taking everyone's money and sweet spice and jewels.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm missing in this. I really love the time they gave to the Separatist cause with Saw Gerrera, but really it was like a militaristic approach. I want a boring PBS C-SPAN civic debate about the merits of separatism and direct democracy in the Star Wars universe. I will read a term paper on this. I mean, I think that's what kind of like threw me, and maybe it's just because I was, briefly a nerdy academic political science major in college, and I did spend too much time reading these books and thinking about it, and like getting into Facebook debates with people on this stuff. But like realistically, if you were to see a direct democracy in the Star Wars universe, it's hard to reconcile that with the luxuriousness of Plaisir 15. I'm wondering, like, how are they getting their money? Is it like old royal wealth? And that's kind of like with Count Dooku as well, is he was such like a flair for fashion. In the real world, direct democracy is a very boring thing. Like, I would imagine a planet that is a true experiment in direct democracy would be pretty like it'd be very egalitarian. Everyone would just be wearing probably civic uniforms. It'd be something like District 13 and Hunger Games,
Yeah.
Like, it would just... I don't think it would be like, hey, we're playing, Disney's Alice in Wonderland croquet right now with Lizzo,
Right.
hanging out with
Using
our
the Force.
Like, I don't think the public would vote to allow to have the former royals. They would probably abolish the monarchy on this planet.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I want to read a newspaper from Plaisir 15. I really like. I think that would be, some fans should make a like daily newspaper, just one edition of the comings and goings of that planet. Now, guys, I gotta ask. This is the question on my mind. Now that the Mandalorians have Gideon's light cruiser, what the fet is next?
I wish that we had some time, because obviously this is a Bo-Katan season, right? Mm-hmm. It's clear at this point she is the main hero of the season. I don't have a problem with that. It's just like we didn't see Axe Woves turn on her. That all happened off screen. They're just like talking about it. And we didn't even like... She mentioned it with like a throwaway line in episode 1. And she seemed kind of bitter, but... She also seemed kind of comfortable sitting in a throne. She just seemed kind of bored more than anything. She didn't look bitter in defeat. Yeah. Like, the lowest moment for Bo-Katan on this season is when her castle on Kalevala got bombed. Right. She was wearing a helmet, and we immediately cut away from her for a Dr. Pershing storyline for 40 minutes. Right. And then by the time we cut back with her, she immediately got a new home on the covert planet. Mm-hmm. It's like, we haven't really seen Bo-Katan struggle or have like any kind of personal gripe with these people other than this moment right now. So it was like a payoff to something that we didn't see. Yeah. So, like, we didn't really know what it means for her to regain this. I would say, like, Clone Wars and Rebels challenged the character of Bo-Katan in more dramatic and more interesting ways than this live-action show has. And it's nothing against Katie Sackhoff. I think she's great. I just think, like, structurally, this season is just kind of scattered all over the place, and it's not really giving us a chance to, like, connect with her emotionally. Yeah. And then I also just got to say, I love watching two Mandalorians fight with each other, but is the flamethrower necessary? No. I know it looks really cool. I don't mind it, but how is that practically useful when they're fighting each other? It's just like, I'm mad now.
Stay away.
Especially because that little shield looked like it was only maybe trash can lid size, but it still took the whole brunt of the fire. And I'm like, I'm going to need that weapon explained because that doesn't make any physical sense. It makes about as much sense in obeying the laws of physics as Captain America's vibranium shield. But it is very, very cool. And I think that, to your point, Eric, I think that Bo-Katan has been a huge focus this season. I think that the relationship between her and Din Djarin is something that they've been spending episodes sort of building up, so that when you get to this moment where she goes to bat for him, and then he explains, like, she's the rightful owner of the Darksaber. The YouTube comments were right. They overthought this, and they were correct. Like, she's the one who should get this through the rule of, losing it in battle and defeating whoever had it in battle. I think that that is a payoff that it would have been more difficult to achieve considering where the characters, how they felt about each other at the beginning of this season. You had to have those bonding episodes. You had to have the episodes where they both saved the kid of the Mandalorian covert, against the big pterodactyl creature.
The raptor.
The raptor, you're right, the bird of prey. But to have her defend Din Djarin and go like, he's cool, he's good, guys, he's a cool dude, and he may have different religious beliefs than us, but he is Mandalorian just the same as we are. I think it's all leading towards the end of this season feels like it's going to be, who is going to be the one that's really going to unite the Mandalorian clans? Is it going to be Bo? or is it going to be Din Djarin? And it looks like it's leaning towards Bo, but if it is, where does that leave Din and Grogu? Are they going to stay with this group and this found family, or are they going to find their own path and continue the sort of wandering samurai tradition that the Mandalorian is inspired by? So we will find out.
I honestly think when they brought Grogu and Mando back together in the Book of Boba Fett, a different show, I think they kind of ran out of ideas of what to do with those two characters. So they're like, let's just do a Bo-Katan season. It just seems like that's what Filoni and Favreau did. They're like, we like Bo-Katan, we like Katie Sackhoff. Let's just do a season where she's a hero. Because like, what have we learned about Din Djarin or Grogu this season? Grogu started babbling and he can now do these big jumps.
Yeah, and I think like there's been little moments like Din encouraging Grogu to like train with the other Mandalorian kid, to duel with them. But even that has felt kind of like not necessarily out of place, but like it sticks out because it's like, oh, this is a rare Din is paying attention to Grogu and like teaching him something moment. Now we're going to get back to this other storyline where raptors are plucking children out of the sky on the most dangerous beach in the world.
Do you guys think it's because the characters of Din Djarin and Grogu are such sort of stoic and simple, I want to say shallow characters? Like when we met Din at the beginning of season 1, what was his ultimate sort of story arc? Is it he's a mercenary, but we knew by the end of episode 1, and you saw that little hand come up, that he was probably going to fall in love with this kid and become an adoptive father. And what else have we learned about Din? He was prejudiced against droids, but now he's cool with them, depending on right? Those are basically the two things that have changed within Din Djarin, who's a very, man with no name, Sergio Leone, like Clint Eastwood, stoic character that doesn't have too much complexity in him. And Grogu's also a puppet who doesn't fucking talk. It's very difficult to put in personality and wants and needs and desires other than like Grogu looking at things and squinting and, and other characters sort of projecting their own, like, you shall be Mandalorian, you shall be Jedi. Right. So these two characters are action figures. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it in a good way. It's totally fine. But do you guys think that this season in particular, it has really kind of become more glaring because, Eric, you mentioned the resolution of him and Grogu happened. We saw that in the Book of Boba Fett. Where else can these characters go, per se? Or do you think that it's still something where the show's writing can still rise to the challenge?
I think they can still rise to the challenge.
I think that one of the problems not problems, but one of the struggles the show faces is that Grogu ages so slowly. So we can't, because if Grogu was really going full on, like becoming a Mandalorian, that would be really cool. But that's going to take like 15 years. Which will be 15 years will be like, he'll then be like a 5-year-old. I don't,
No, he won't, because we saw, I don't know, how many years was Order 66 prior to this? Like 30 some years, something like that. And he looks the same. And he's 50 now, and he was 20 years old then. Right. So, but even if we get to like the sequel trilogy era, he's going to look the same. Even if we get past Episode 9, Rise of Skywalker, and Grogu becomes some sort of protagonist of Episodes 10, 11, and 12, or some future Star Wars storytelling, he's going to look the same. He's a baby.
Oh, I don't know about that.
He's a babbling baby.
You can look at... My parents have that kind of photo spread of me for all my brothers and sisters from kindergarten through I believe my senior year of high school, and like I look the same. Like people look at me like, Eric, is this just the same kindergarten photo? And I'm like, no, I'm 13 here. And then suddenly between 18 and 19, I turned into a man. I got a big Adam's apple that bulged out. I got a couple beach fuzz that came out. I shot up a couple feet. I became a man.
So we don't know what Yoda species puberty is like, and when it hits, how hard does it hit?
I bet it's hell.
Fair. Look, we saw.
Right.
We were with Baby Groot for a few years, and then he was Teen Groot, and he's So you're right. You're right. We could absolutely shift around how that aging works, but yeah. To your point, Tommy, it's difficult to treat that character as like a main character of the show, when I feel like really he is this great. He is like Yoda. Like Yoda, I don't know if Yoda ever works as a main focus character in a Star Wars, any kind of a long form thing. Yoda-focused episodes of the Clone Wars are fantastic, but Yoda is a character who I think works best as a supporting character, and I think that's what Grogu is too. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the writing can rise to the challenge, but you have to be willing to kill your darlings. And I think a lot of us were theorizing going into the season, especially at the beginning, that they were going to take a real critical eye at the Children of the Watch and the way and the cult orthodoxy of it, and they haven't. They've just kind of like championed it, or haven't really made any kind of bold statement on it. That's what Filoni did so well in Clone Wars. We weren't really sure where they were going to go, and then season 5 comes along, and then for the first time we're questioning the Jedi Order and we're showing the flaws in their thinking. And to me, that's when Clone Wars was at its best. Like, what's more beloved than the Jedi in the Star Wars fandom? And they were able to like take characters like, you know, Yoda, like Mace Windu, like Ki-Adi-Mundi, and then say like, no, those guys were clearly wrong-minded on so many things and were strict. And why don't they do that with this clear cult? Like instead, they're just like they're having this championing music when the armorer is like, take off your helmet. She walks in both worlds. It's like. I look, I don't mind a good Story of the Week Clone Wars episode vibe. There's a lot of people watching this episode are like, I didn't watch Clone Wars, I don't get it. I watch new Rockstars videos to explain to me what I need to know about Clone Wars and
Watch
Rebels.
Clone Wars. Watch it.
Watch it. Just watch it. But if you watch it, I think you're going to find some episodes like a Jar Jar episode. 3PO and R2 are doing what? Like, you know, there are those arcs. But overall, there's a lot of great arcs in there. I think it is worth watching. But yeah, I think this late in the season to have another one that just kind of feels a bit scattered structurally is just going to throw some people. And I think the issue is that people are willing to nostalgically look back at Clone Wars and forgive it because they were younger when they watched it. And those are a lot of the same people who are now watching The Mandalorian. Clone Wars was 13 years ago when those first seasons came out. Those people are older now. We have seen more complex, sophisticated versions to tell these stories. We've watched Andor, we've watched Rogue One, and we've watched other non-Star Wars media that we've really grown to love. You can't just do the same kind of basic first draft storytelling with these things and not like give your characters more character development and hope that everyone's just going to be on the same train. We're more like, know your audience. And I don't think there's little kids who are watching this the same wedge of extent. It's like a live action show. It's not animated. You have to raise the bar a bit with how much you challenge your characters and challenge their assumptions.
I agree. I think that's exactly it. They got to aim a little higher, I think.
I just want, like, if you're going to say Dooku is right, I want to know why.
Yeah.
Like, explain why.
Yeah.
Bring in just do a bit of Googling into political theory and like give a Doc Brown a bit more explanation as to why, not just that the Jedi were evil or that, you know, Palpatine exposed all of them for their flaws, but like get back to some like talk about the merits of democracy. Show us in the episode how, like, because all we saw was Plaisir 15 looks like a failed experiment.
Yeah.
You can't say that like direct democracy is great and then also show like a bunch of like wealthy 1%ers who are doing hat shopping and need a droid to do all their heavy lifting for them.
Or droids that are like seemingly like a marginalized group. A vulnerable class in this world, and they're just trying to like, just kind of scrape by and not really get noticed or anything, and I wonder if that's like the struggle that Lucasfilm and Star Wars has right now, where maybe these conversations are being had and they're going, but we already kind of covered this in the other stuff. In the Clone Wars animated show, and the Tales of the Jedi had some Dooku-specific centric things. And maybe because Star Wars does try, to the best of its ability, treat all of their media as like the same level of importance, right? Like they Star Wars in the past couple of years especially has reinforced going, no. Characters introduced in animated shows like Ahsoka and Thrawn, they're just as important as characters like Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and Rey Skywalker. And that's very admirable, and I really like that Star Wars tries to treat all of its media like that. I like that they have gone and said all of the things we're doing across the board, whether it's in publishing or video games or VR or whatever, we're all trying to make it as canon as we can and try to be respectful to that and not be redundant. But it goes to the conversation. I know that, speaking of Tales of the Jedi, there was an episode that was Ahsoka specific towards the end where she was fighting one of the Inquisitors, right? And some fans who have been consuming all of the Star Wars media, they pointed to a novel that came out and they said, that's an Ahsoka novel. And Filoni was sort of like, yeah, true, because the novel was based on, the novel's like an expanded version of what was a treatment that we had while we were making Clone Wars and we never got around to animating it. Well, now we did Tales of the Jedi, I just animated it. And it's essentially the same story. And Star Wars fans are going, is Star Wars now being redundant? telling the same story in different medium when they should have been saying, the book happened, it's canon, just go read this book. Here's a different Ahsoka story. Or is it still important to show in an animated format a story that maybe people who are not readers would have never experienced? Would it be redundant if Eric, like you're saying, if they had Christopher Lloyd give us a little more about Dooku and his ideology, when Star Wars fans would go, yeah, we've seen this already, we watched this, this, and this. But should Star Wars be trying to treat every one of their projects like it's someone's first and only Star Wars? Are there people who really, truly are only watching The Mandalorian and didn't watch the Book of Boba Fett in between seasons 2 and 3? That's kind of wild to me, but I understand I'm not a normal person. I like to consume Star Wars at every single iota and atom, and that's not most general audience's approach to this kind of thing. So is Star Wars trying to respect their own stuff that they've already done, or should they be thinking about this as every single one of these projects should be entry level and the only thing a Star Wars fan ever sees?
That's a really interesting point, Hector. I think you're asking the right questions because, yeah, obviously, I assume internally that's what they're asking themselves too. I think when they're at their best, they're doing both. They're telling a story that anybody who hasn't seen a single episode of Clone Wars and Rebels can watch, tune in, and enjoy. And then, but they throw in little Easter eggs or little, Zeb cameos, whatever it is, that people can go online and then get explanations on what it is. But what made the Zeb cameo last week so brilliant is that, like, you didn't need to know who Zeb was to appreciate that moment. You're just like, here's a really well CGI'd character, just who has this connection with Paul Sung-Hee, and it's like just saying, you need to, good luck trying to get something out of the New Republic in a cool Top Gun setting. Like, that's all we needed. But yeah, this episode, it's just like, I think if anybody were to tune in without knowing Clone Wars, without having seen Clone Wars, I think they're really going to be thrown by this episode.
I guess we have to ask Leonardo DiCaprio, who we know watches The Mandalorian. I don't know if Leonardo DiCaprio has watched Clone Wars. I don't think he has. But maybe he has because he can better relate to his girlfriend's ages.
Yeah, do you think Leo DiCaprio's, when he sees that the actress who played the Quarren was 24 years older than the guy who played the Mon Calamari, and he's going to be like, no, that doesn't make any sense. He got it reversed.
Now it's unrealistic, he says. I
think he went, ew, 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 ew. All right. Let's get out of here. We've embarrassed ourselves.
We'll leave it there for this episode of Wookiee Leaks. Hey, if you don't know what we're talking about with DiCaprio, hey, just never Google your heroes, I guess.
Yes.
But we'll leave it there. And hey, I know we've been hard on this episode, but that's what these reaction shows are to do. We still overall we love these characters. We love that this show exists at all. We're happy to have like live action Star Wars to talk about every week. So no faults there. But the Easter egg breakdown, again, will come out tomorrow. You can follow me at EA Voss. You can follow Tommy at Tommy Bechtold. You can follow Hector at Hector is Funny. And we will be back next week to react to Season 3, Episode 7, which will be directed by Rick Famuyiwa. These final 2 episodes will be. So I'm very excited to see what they're going to do.
Thrawn.
You can check out the deep dive on Friday. We'll be doing a deep dive into Christopher Nolan's Interstellar. I think it's going to be a really great one. Hopefully you watch it, enjoy it. You can follow New Rockstars, subscribe to Wookiee Leaks wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for watching, and we'll bring back our original sign-off with the Ugnaughts returning.
We
have spoken.